want to know where Somes is, if you look at the Bicknell map that uh, um, Dr. Hartman was showing you earlier, up here on this map, you see the word Somes, but that's underneath Pokanoket.
Pokanoket.
And Pokanoket is this whole territory here, all the way over to the Cape, but not including the Cape, including both the islands, and going up basically to the Charles River. So it was a huge territory, and in fact, the Pokanokets had alliances with the Nipmucks, and went all the way over to New York State and all the way up to New Hampshire. So when you talk about the Massasoit Osamequin, who most people are familiar with from the story of the Pilgrims, you get some understanding of how large a nation this was. And easily 12,000 people, and some say all over New England, over 100,000 people of different tribes. But that's the area we're talking about. And people lived here for easily 10,000 years. Basically, since the glaciers retreated, people were able to move into the area. And it was a terrific area because you could eat year round.
Well, yeah.
And you know, if you hang around someplace for 10,000 years, you figure out where the best places are.
Oh my gosh.
And Somes was considered by all of the tribes around as one of the best places to live because of the easy access to water, mild climate, easy transportation by water. So it really had a lot of advantages, and that's why the Pokanokets worked very hard to maintain their land. And guess who their rivals were? Tina, none other than the Narragansetts.
There were warring people, I understand.
Well, you know, and all people had to protect themselves, so that wasn't unusual. But there was a dividing line. Basically, the Narragansetts were on the West Bay, and the Pokanokets were on the East Bay, and that's the way the Pokanokets wanted to keep it.
Why are humans so greedy and selfish?
Well,
that's a whole nother lecture.
It is.
As you also pointed out, they were related to one another. Okay, so if you know, it's the white Western view is there were two sides, and they never cooperated, never talked to one another. That's not true.
No, divide and conquer happened real easy, it seems like.
Right. And there's a lot of intermarriage and things of that sort. So it's more like, think of, extended families, and, you can be over there and we'll be over here. Okay. We'll leave it like that.
I think there are Hatfields and McCoys in every single culture on the planet.
Exactly. Same idea.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest event that occurred historically that really changed things was a pandemic. We now know what pandemics are like, but imagine a pandemic in which 90% of people died. Okay, I mean, we're not even at 1% with the current pandemic, but 9 out of 10 people literally, I mean, they had horrible descriptions. We don't know for sure what the diseases were. They could have been several of them. Leprospirosis is one of the possibilities, but smallpox, measles, you name it. People died horrible deaths and were so affected settlement by settlement that there weren't enough people alive to bury the dead. So when the Pilgrims arrived in December of 1620, they found Patuxet, or what we call Plymouth, just littered with human bones. Who had died, and no one buried them, and there they were. So, of course, in the Western point of view is, oh, that's a sign from God. So he has prepared the way, and they say that, and so people moved in to an area that was already cleared for farming, and what a deal, great real estate. But It wasn't long after that. The Massasoit Osamequin was about in his 30s at that time, and he was facing a lot of pressure from the Narragansetts because of the epidemic wiped out so many of his warriors. He was down to about a tenth of. He went from 3,000 warriors to 300, and yeah, and he was very concerned that the Narragansetts were going to acquire his land. In fact, yeah, they'd made some attempts at that. So he did what any reasonable diplomat would do, is to form an alliance. And the one thing that the English had, the English were not scary people, other than the fact that they were small and gnarly and scrappy and disease ridden.
They had guns.
Exactly. They had guns, cannons, and knives and axes and all kinds of things that no one here had experience with. So, especially at the beginning, all it took in one little skirmish when when Canonicus decided to come over here, Miles Standish got a little group of guys together, came over and just shot their guns off. They didn't shoot at anybody. They just shot their guns. And that was enough to tell the Narragansetts stay away, and they did. So that was the agreement, and you can read all about I won't go through all of this, but it was basically, we'll protect you, you protect us. And that held for over 50 years. So that was a very important agreement. And had it not been for that agreement, probably all of us would be speaking Algonquin today. The major diplomat in this of the English was Ed Winslow. He was kind of like their Secretary of State, and he was a good guy. He spent a lot of time getting to know people in the Pokanoket tribe, learning their ways, learning a little bit of their language, not as much as Roger Williams, but he was pretty conversant. And of course, there were a couple guys who were able to translate. So because they had been captured by Hunt back in 1616, taken to Spain and then England, and worked their way back here. So we know Tisquantum or Squanto really served as the translator between the English and the tribes. So they were able to communicate quite well. Here in Warren, the one evidence you can find of what we believe to be the home of the Massasoit is a well. It's on Baker Street in Warren, where I live, and there's another one over in Barrington as well. Those are small vestiges of, if you can imagine that people were living here for 10,000 years. This is a well-populated, well-understood area, and yet the colonists had pretty much erased everything. So we end up with a couple stones, and that's about it. One thing that Winslow did that really helped was he came in 1621 over here to what is Warren today, then came back in 23 when he heard that the Massasoit was deathly ill. Winslow was able to administer some potions and whatever he could figure out to help him and cured him, basically. I mean, that's Winslow's story. Okay, I have no idea what the Massasoit would have said, but in any case, we ended up with a stronger relationship, and that really helped the English navigate this whole area. But it wasn't helping the tribe because they were continuing to get sick. There were a number of outbreaks and along the way, especially in about 1632, many more were dying. So their population was going down while the English population was exploding. If you remember your history, a flotilla of 10 ships came over in 1630 to Boston with the Mass Bay colony and brought 1,000 people. So they, of course, had children over the next couple generations, and By the outbreak of the King Philip War, there were over 50,000 English people here, but maybe as few as 2 or 3,000 native people all over the area here. So,
Why do they even call it a war?
well,
It's not a war. It's not even
it's an invasion.
remotely equal.
Yeah, it's an invasion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. That sounds a little better. Wow.
Here. So here's a couple of pictures I did on Google of what the territory here would have looked like. What you're looking at in this picture is where Barrington is now. We believe that there may have been settlements here and across where Warren is now, but there's a lot of cleared land, and the English made note of that fact. Here's Miles Standish, who referred to Solmes as the Garden of the Patent, and the patent was what they got from the king to occupy any parts of New England, and he called it the flower, but misspelled flower of the garden. But basically because he looked at the land here and said, this is perfect for English crops and English livestock.
Mm.
They brought livestock, and before you know it, there were pigs and cattle all over the place, trampling on the Pokanoket's plantings, and that became another way that the English really occupied and colonized the land. Was you just let your pigs go for a while, and they destroy some English, some native gardens, and next thing is you've moved in. So that process was going on and on and on. And there were real different cultural worldviews, differences between them. Native people live on the land, live with the land and not on it, hunt animals, not raise them, manage land, not acquire it, have use agreements. This whole idea about,
It belongs to everybody, so we have to share it. Yeah.
And you have agreements about you can fish here, you can hunt there, that kind of thing. But no one owned land. That idea was preposterous to them.
Mm.
God owns the land, not you. They celebrated religion in nature, not in churches, and had more of an acceptance of what can't be controlled. Rather, the English wanted to rule nature with good and evil. And
If they couldn't control it, it was evil.
that's right. And that's the way they saw it. If something bad happened, it's because they were bad. They were evil. Moving quickly along here to Roger Williams, who I presume everybody at Roger Williams University knows about, so I won't tell you about him much, but he basically came down through Solmes. He probably spent time in at this place. This is the rock where he was sheltered. If you imagine building a lean-to against that rock. We think that he spent 14 weeks there recovering from his awful 60-mile journey on foot in one of the coldest Januaries in history here. But he was friends with Osamequin. He got to know him when he was in Plymouth, and it was Osamequin who really ensured that he survived, and then sent him along up to East Providence, where you can see the Roger Williams Spring. That was where he first tried to start a colony, and then Ed Winslow came over just while his crops were just beginning to grow and said, sorry, you're on our land, you got to get out of here. So he crossed the river, and you all know the story about What Cheer and Neetop.
What Cheer, Neetop.
Yep. So the only few remnants of Roger's time in Providence are, there's this depiction down here in the lower left of what his settlement may have looked like. The Great Salt Pond is now where Waterfire takes place. This hill here is where the State House is. Back here, this hill is Newtoconnicut Hill. It's the highest point in Providence, and nobody knows about it. It's almost 300 feet high.
That's not where is Roger Williams' statue that overlooks the city?
That's up on Prospect Terrace, and that's up the hill.
Oh, the other way.
Yeah, Yeah, it's if you basically go up Benefit Street, you'll find it.
Right.
But I have this picture of the Weybosset Bridge because this is an early map going back into the 1700s. But this is the bridge, the first bridge that was put across the river that allowed people from the western side. If you were in Narragansett land, you wanted to go to Pokanoket land by foot. Of course, they would go by water. But
Yeah.
if you're going to walk, you would wade across
By
this
foot.
low tide. And so they eventually built a bridge. The bridge that's there today at the bottom of College Street is the 8th bridge that's been there. But the first bridge that was there, this one, Roger Williams served as a bridge attendant. A toll taker.
Yeah. We read the document in our class already where he's asking for help to maintain the bridge and asking somebody from each family to
Taxes.
do a.
Oh yeah,
It comes with government.
it's kind of
Yeah.
cool when you think about it. I'm not going to explain this, but basically these are the various land purchases that took place. But bit by bit, you notice that it's Wampanoag lands here. That's Pokanoket. But gradually the English bought more and more and finally became Swansea, and then it got divided between Warren and Barrington. But the territory below, which is now Bristol, where Roger Williams University is, was never. So that was until the King Philip War, was always under the control of the Pokanokets. Moving along here, real quickly, this is in Providence. The first settlement in this area was a group from Weymouth, Massachusetts, who came down and established what's known as the Ring of the Green. If you want to get into that, I'm sure you can talk more in your classes about it, but it's basically a large area for your livestock, and then everybody had land that connected with water.
Oh.
River on one side, the Seekonk River on the other, and actually the 10-mile river comes down through here. So it was quite an arrangement and worked very well. Unfortunately, when the war broke out, King Philip and his men decided that we don't want the English here, so they burned everybody's houses. But they did have some mills there in the 1640s or so, some of which you can see at Hunt's Mills in East Providence. I recommend you go there. This is a map I put together showing where the English settlements are. All these areas in yellow. You got Bill Blackstone up the Blackstone River. Obviously, Roger Williams over here in Warren. There were other settlements, Miles Garrison, not far from where the First Baptist Church started. You talked about that, I assume.
Yes, we've talked a little bit about that. But you misspelled Miles. It's M-Y-L-E-S.
Yes, well, it depends on who you talk to.
Yeah, if you talk to John Miles, he spells it M-Y-L-E-S. I have a copy of his signature.
Okay. And then Swayze Corner, part of today's Swansea, settlements down here. The closest settlement to the Pokanoket land was right here in Warren. But you also have settlements down on Aquidneck Island and over here in Warwick. So basically, Philip, who was the Massasoit's son, was surrounded. And all he could see was, wait a few more years, the English will move in on this land too, and will be gone. Okay, it's called erasure of, or what we call genocide today. Okay, here's a map. It's too hard to explain, but basically, we're a fence line in Warren dividing the Pokanoket land on the right from the English land on the left. The war broke out in '75. I won't go into detail about that. Everybody who gets into the history here just talks about the war like it's the only thing that happened. And no, it was 14 months and it was devastating, but it's not the only thing that happened back then. the war went from basically where Warren is, where it broke out, all the way up into New Hampshire and Northampton and areas there. But if you look at that line there, what I like about this map is it showed all the places where the native people burned English villages. And what they're doing is basically forcing them back to Boston and ultimately back to England. A number of people did exactly that. They left. And that was initially was the war effort. It wasn't to kill people. It was to get them out of here.
Run them out.
Well, yeah. Does this sound familiar? Let's see, the Rohingyas and where else in the world are we colonizers trying to get rid of native people? I mean, that's exactly what that was about. Philip ends up dying not far from your campus. You've been to Mount Hope Farm, I hope. You can see that the place where he was killed. There's the marker in the area there at Mount Hope Farm looks like, or used to look like, this is all overgrown right now. This is the Miles Garrison where some of the war.
Just to be clear, John Miles was the first pastor of the church that I served. I mean, I just want to make sure that our students understand that that's how I got into this narrative.
Yeah, that's to give make sure that Dr. Hartman is a full colonizer.
Yeah.
And inherited the effects of colonization. The last well-known place that the war took place was at Anawan Rock up in Rehoboth. So if you get into all this, and I recommend you go on the Somes Heritage Area page. You'll learn all about this. I'm just zooming through this right now in the interest of time. But there are many places in the area. Here's John Miles, correctly spelled, over at Tyler Point, the cemetery. One of the early residents of Warren, burial sites in Rehoboth and Swansea. A wonderful burial site is the ancient Little Neck Cemetery in Rumford. And you'll see the grave of Elizabeth Tilley, who grew up in England, moved to Leiden with the separatists, came across on the Mayflower, grew up in New England and in Massachusetts, and lived through the King Philip War, and then eventually moved to East Providence with her daughter, and that's where she's died and why she's buried there. And you also have Tom Willett, who was twice the mayor of New York City, who came from there. So a lot of interesting stuff. Some areas are still visible as they might have been 400 years ago, and fortunately, some of these areas have been preserved. And part of the Somes Heritage Area project is to make sure that these stay preserved. People know about them and value them. You know, like a lot of things, when people don't know anything, they, neglect does a lot to erase early time, right? Couple things that you might not have seen if you come into Warren from Swansea on Route 136, across from Johnson's Market, you will see this, what I believe to be a perched rock on bedrock. It's a glacial erratic, but the fact that it's where it is and it's obviously propped up by stones indicates that people had a lot to do with it being there. And I was just over in Tiverton looking at similar perched rocks there. We say people have lived here for 10,000 years, but where are the pyramids? Where's the Acropolis? Well, these are the pyramids. These are the Acropoli, okay? This is evidence. Here's King's Rock right across the street from this one, where native women would grind corn by rolling a rock across this flat surface here. If you know where to look, you can find the very places that Osamequin and his people were very familiar with. Here's up at Mount Hope, if you haven't gone to the seat up there. And here's a Nudiconicut Hill. There's a very sacred place where the 4 tribes would gather for council. And that's there. It's not marked, but if you know where to look, you can find it.
Mm.
So just to finish up here, some of the houses, colonizer houses that are around, I particularly like the Bosworth House in Bristol, right across from Sip and Dip as you come down into the town there. That house was built in 1680. It was the first house in Bristol. Of course, the colonizers got Bristol after the war. They just took it by eminent domain. There was never a treaty, and now, of course, the Pokanokets want to get at least their sacred land back from Brown University, who holds it up there at Mount Hope. So there's a struggle going on today, and I'm working with a group to help them in that process. But this Bosworth House was the house for the pastor of the church. You had to have a minister to have a church. You had to have a church to have a town. Once you had a church, you have a meeting place.
Those were the good old days.
But the first thing you did was build a parsonage, and they brought the wood over from England to build this. So it hasn't been restored yet. We got to get somebody to buy it. Got $1 million? Okay, here we are finishing up. This is back at the Burrs Hill, next to where I live. This was the burial site, the reburial site of over 600 items that were removed from Burrs Hill in 1913 by then town librarian Charles Carr, an amateur archaeologist who was tired of seeing people dig up skeletons in this area and take them home, and decided he was going to remove them and at least put them in museums. He should have left them there, and everybody should have left them there, but that's not what they did in 1913. So the Mashpee tribe, you see up here, spent 20 years gathering those from the Native American Graveside Reclamation Act, and gathered over 600 items, and then got the town to bury a vault, and then put this marker on top of it and had a celebration in 2017. If you want to know more, it's all on the website. So this is the tribe today. These are the folks that I work with every day. Here's Two Hawks, if you remember him. This is the Sagamore Winds of Thunder, Bill Guy. And here they are up at Mount Hope at the seat and at one of their powwows. So if anybody wonders whatever happened to the tribe that struck the agreement with the Pilgrims, they're still here today, over 300 of them. So this is what we found. If you follow along and you go on the website, you'll find over 50 locations that you can go and visit. Your students are down here, not far from King Philip's seat. You can go over and see the First Congregational Church. We have a marker, but we haven't put it up yet because of the pandemic. But there are houses and all kinds of things you can discover. So if you're looking for something to do in your spare time, there's plenty to look. Okay, I think I'm done. Stop there.
Okay, there we go. Let's see who's
Thanks,
left
Dave.
here.
Oh, you're
All righty, thank you, Dave.
You taught me far more than I knew previously, so I appreciate you.